So in continuation to yesterday's second class, in which we focused on the discourse that the Lubavitcher Rebbe said in Pesach 1978, focusing on the wise son's question, as we find in Parshat V'Etchanan, the book of Deuteronomy, which the wise son asks, Ma ha'edus v'chukim v'mishpatim asher tziva Hashem Elokechem eschem. What are these testimonial mitzvot, these irrational mitzvot, and these civil laws that our God commanded you? Now, in that discourse that we started learning yesterday, and Emir Hashem will get back to tomorrow and throughout the next 2 weeks, which is phenomenal out of this world, the focus is on the verses in Parshat V'Etchanan, because in the Torah we're commanded to instruct him, to answer him, that we, as we discussed yesterday, that we were slaves to Paro in Egypt, etc. And then Hashem took us out of Egypt, gave us a Torah and the mitzvot in order to benefit us. But in the Haggadah, the answer is different. In the Haggadah, we instruct we answer the Ben HaChacham, the wise son, that after partaking from the Afikoman, we are not allowed to eat anything else. And that's the halacha, actually. That after eating the Afikoman, towards the end of the Seder, before benching, we are not allowed to eat anything throughout the night. If a person gets thirsty, they're allowed to drink water. But this matzah should be the last thing that we eat. Again, the Afikoman is taken from the middle matzah that is stored in the matzah bag. We know that we have 3 matzot on the table. Whoever is conducting the Seder, and some people have a minhag that each family, head of family, even though there could be 20, 30 people, but each head of family, and sometimes even Bachrim, even students, like to have their own entire Seder plate with the matzot. Parenthetically, it's very important to emphasize, before we move forward, that the Seder plate in itself and the various foods that we position upon the Seder plate is part and parcel of the service. There's an exact positioning for each one of the foods. The matzot, we know, are placed one on top of the other, and if a person doesn't have a proper matzah bag, or however it is, some people have cases, some people have bags, but there has to be a partition between each matzah, between the bottom, the middle, and the top. So if a person doesn't have a proper Seder bag, they could use napkins between each matzah. But nevertheless, it has to be 3 matzot, and Kabbalistically speaking, the matzot should be turned upright. In other words, if they're curbed, they should be the curb should be facing upright to represent a vessel. Because the matzot themselves are the vessel for the light that Hashem shines throughout Pesach. We know that the first night of Pesach, eating matzah, as our sages tell us, matzah on the first night is considered the bread of faith, that eating the matzah internalizes the faith to each Jew, because each Jew, Baruch Hashem, are believers, son of believers, but sometimes the faith is somewhat external to the person. It encompasses a person rather than being internalized. So the Talmud gives us a very interesting example of this, and we've spoken about this, and actually in security camera footage in Israel, you can see this. The Talmud tells us that a thief, prior to breaking and entering into someone's home, offers a prayer to Hashem to make him successful in his endeavor to breaking and entering, and it should be a very valuable heist. And the obvious question is, if he is praying to Hashem to be successful in robbing a house, God forbid. So on one hand, he believes, on the other hand, he is willing to break and enter and break Hashem's law. But that is a sign that, of course, a person has faith. In Israel, we see this, that before breaking and entering, and the security footage, the robbers actually kiss a mezuzah before they walk in. Because of course they have faith, but that faith is encompassing, it hasn't been internalized. So eating matzah on the first night internalizes faith. Because the ultimate agent of liberty is the faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in Hashem. Knowing that there is a God and having faith in a God who has been with us since forever. This in itself releases us from so many of our innate mechanisms that keep us down. When we live with our faith and our faith gives us life, our anxieties, our worries, our apprehensiveness melts away instantly. That's the first night. The second night of Pesach, matzah is called the food of healing. That if somebody is sick, God forbid, they should eat the matzah of the second night and they'll be healed. I remember when I first came to Crown Heights, my mashpir Rabbi Goldberg told me about a woman in Crown Heights just about 9 years before that went into a coma. And her daughter walked by the Rebbe, this is after Pesach, for a bracha for her mother. And the Rebbe asked her if she has any matzah left from the second night to crush it up and to put it in her mom's lips, into her mom's mouth. And she did, and the mother woke up, Baruch Hashem. The matzot themselves correspond to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes, kindness, discipline, and harmony. Corresponds to Kohen, Levi, and Israel. Kohen being the kindness, Chesed, Levi being the Gvura, and Israel being the Tiferet, the harmony. And then we have the Seder plate immediately upon the matzah bag. And upon the Seder plate, we have 6 foods. And the positioning of the foods is very precise because each one of these foods corresponds to an attribute. And when we count what's upon our Seder plate altogether with the matzot, we actually count 10 items. 3 matzot. The Seder plate is considered part and parcel of the service itself. And 6 foods altogether, 10 items altogether. And we know that these 10 correspond to the 10 attributes. So the matzot corresponds to the intellect, and the rest of the items corresponds to the 7 emotions. The afikoman, as we spoke about yesterday, today the afikoman is in lieu of the Paschal offering and the Korban Pesach, as we're not allowed to offer any offerings outside of the vicinity of the Beit HaMikdash when it's fully operational with the Kohen and Levi and Israel and so on and so forth. So we're not allowed to give offerings of any sorts. And that's why, by the way, on the Seder plate, that when we have the zroa, some of you people use chicken necks. Some people use other items. We use a chicken neck because it looks like an outstretched hand. But the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, this is our minhag, would burn the chicken neck to a crisp. So no meat would be viable to eat. Because we're not allowed to broil on the first night of Pesach. Because we're not to broil meat because then there would be it could be maybe confused that we are broiling as an offering. So this zroa is the only food at pan, the Seder plate, which is not eaten. It corresponds to the Paschal offering as well. And that's why the Frierdiker Rebbe would burn it to a crisp, so not to give an impression that we can eat of it at all. By the way, and parenthetically, as I'm thinking about it, just as a point, by our minhag, we don't eat matzah 30 days before Pesach. And on the eve of Pesach, we don't eat any food which is exclusive to the Seder plate in itself. So let's go back to the afikuman. The afikuman is in lieu of the korban Pesach. And as we spoke about yesterday, the afikuman is derived from the second matzah, the middle matzah, corresponding to Yitzchak or Levi, which both corresponds to Gvura. We break that middle matzah into two halves. The smaller half we leave in the matzah bag in order to fulfill the instruction that we have to have our Seder over lechem oniam, poor man's bread. And it's called poor man's bread. One of the reasons it's called poor man's bread is because poor people couldn't afford whole loaves. And I remember even in Israel when we were growing up, we wouldn't buy whole loaves. You would buy a quarter of a loaf. So we leave the smaller part of the matzah in the middle to mekayim, to fulfill the instruction of having our seder over poor man's bread. The bigger part, according to our minhag, is further broken into 5 parts, because in Gvura, there are 5 contractions that make this world up. And so we further break the bigger part of the matzah into 5 parts, and those 5 parts are stored away till the end, till almost the end of Seder, right before benching. But we must eat before benching the afikuman.
We must eat the afikuman
before. We must. The first night we must eat afikuman before midnight. Whatever midnight is, I'm going to actually post a time. It's not 12 o'clock. Midnight is according to the Jewish hours. And I'm going to be posting the time in our chats. The second night you could go all night long, because the first night is biblically ordained. The second night that we add here outside of Israel is because of a potential confusion as to exactly the date. So since the biblical time in Israel, they would determine Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the new month, when 2 separate witnesses saw the sliver of the moon, the beginning of the moon, just revealing itself in the skies. They would run to the rabbinical court, the Beit Din, and provide testimony that they just saw this, and Beit Din would declare that today's Rosh Chodesh. However, outside of the immediate vicinity of Israel, or some parts in Israel, would take Beit Din would send throughout Israel emissaries in order to let everybody know that today's Rosh Chodesh. But sometimes there would have been a delay, and that's why they added a second day to Yom Tov outside of the immediate proper Israel, just in case there's a confusion as to exactly when Rosh Chodesh is, to make sure that we actually celebrate Yom Tov. But in Israel, Yom Tov is only one day. There's only the first day and the last day. Outside of Israel, there are 2 first days. There's 2 first days of Yom Tov and last 2 days of Yom Tov. The first day is biblically ordained, and the second one is rabbinically ordained. So the mitzvah of having the Paschal offering on the 15th of Nisan is a biblical ordained mitzvah. and we had to have eaten just like in the times of just like when we first came out of Egypt, the night before we first came out of Egypt, when we had our very first Seder. We had to have completed the Paschal offering before midnight. So too, we on the first night, henceforth, we finished the Afikoman before midnight. The second night, you could go as long as you want. Now, the way we store the Afikoman in itself, we're going to discuss. There's a very deep analysis of this. Actually, I posted the laws of Pesach. It should be in there as well, but I'm going to repost the exact times of when we have to conclude eating the chametz on Erev Pesach, when we have to be burnt by, and all the times, the prescribed time, when the midnight of the first night, and so on and so forth. Okay, but in the Haggadah, the wise son asks this question: what are these testimonial, these irrational, and these civil laws that our God commanded you? And in the Haggadah, we answer the Ben HaChacham, the wise son, that after the Afikoman, we don't eat anything. Now, the Rebbe begins this talk, which is printed in Likutei Sichot, Volume 3, in delving into the answer that we provide to the wise son in the Haggadah. Because many of the Mefarshim, many of the commentators of the Haggadah ask this question. The Ben HaChacham, the wise son, asks, what are these testimonial mitzvot, these irrational laws, and these civil laws that our God commanded us? And out of all the answers that we could have provided him, our sages who compiled the Haggadah, who wrote and compiled the Haggadah, instruct us to answer him that after eating the Afikoman, we don't eat anything else. And that's halacha. That after eating the Afikoman, we're not allowed to eat anything. We're allowed to drink if we're thirsty water, but we're not allowed to eat anything, because the Afikoman has to remain in the last thing you ate on your palate, and so on and so forth, for the duration of the night, and we're going to discuss why later on. But out of all the laws that could have been instructed to him, why this? And how does this answer his question? He is asking regarding the various types of mitzvot. And we choose to answer regarding one particular detail of the Seder. That after eating the Afikoman, we're not allowed to eat anything else. The nature of the Chacham, the wise son's question, is regarding all the laws that pertain to Pesach. The testimonial laws that we know what are the testimonial laws? Testimonial laws are laws or mitzvot that in performing these mitzvot, we are testifying as to something that otherwise would not be known. When do you call in a witness to the stand? When the judge and the jury, the court, weren't present in order to see what happened and what didn't happen. A witness is there to bear testimony, reveal something which otherwise would be obscure. When we perform the testimonial mitzvot, we are bearing witness. What are testimonial mitzvahs? For example, Pesach is the Seder and the observance of Pesach is testifying that we are slaves in Egypt and Hashem took us out of Egypt. Shabbat, we are testifying that Hashem created the world in 6 days, and the 7th He rested. And by the way, that's why in Friday night Kiddush and the daytime Kiddush, when we say Kiddush, we must be standing like a witness who is standing in front of the court. And so on and so forth. Then there are irrational laws. And then there are civil laws. So the Chacham is asking, the Ben HaChacham, the wise son, is asking, what are all the various mitzvot that pertain to Pesach? And therefore, the answer should have satisfied all three categories. We should have delved into the testimonial part of it, the irrational part of it, and the civil part of it. And explaining the process of the Seder in order to satisfy his question. But in fact, we're instructed to answer him regarding only one detail of the Seder, that after the Afikoman, we are not allowed to eat anything. How does this answer his question? Another question. What bichlal is a wise son's question? If he is so wise, as we spoke about in the discourse, that the Torah deems him to be wise, and the ultimate wisdom is the wisdom of the Torah, then obviously he knows the laws. And being that he knows the laws of the Torah, what exactly is his question? What are these testimonial mitzvot, these irrational mitzvot, these civil laws that our God commanded you? Obviously he knows the laws. The order of the Seder of the night of Pesach is question and answer. It's very interesting because we're actually instructed to ask as many questions that night as possible regarding our faith, regarding our practices, regarding our traditions, regarding our history, regarding our family's history, and to tell the story as much as possible and to elucidate as much as possible. We know that the Haggadah tells us that in Bnei Brak, in the time of the Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva, four our great sages were sitting together and conducting the Seder throughout the entire night of Pesach, until their students walked in and told the rabbis it's time to say Shema in the morning time. And the Rebbe asks, why did the students need to tell him that? Obviously, they would know it's morning time, and they were very meticulous of the Shema. But the Rebbe explains that in the style of the Seder, questioning and answering, because first of all, one of the greatest signs of liberty is the ability to ask a question. A slave is not allowed to ask questions. And so yes, the Seder night is based on questions and answers and elucidation, as the Haggadah says, V'chol hamar b'lesaper b'sipur yitzias Mitzrayim b'leil Seder hazeh meshubach. That anyone who the more we tell the story, the more praiseworthy we are. So the Rebbe explains that the word telling, lesaper, to tell the story, the word lesaper, the more we tell the story, the more praiseworthy. Lesaper, to tell the story, comes from sapphire, sapir, the sapphire stone which illuminates. And so the more we tell, the more we're illuminating. And so the Rebbe explains that they sat together in the Seder and illuminated that night, the darkness of exile which was reigning because of the destruction of the Second Temple in their generation, and the Holocaust in which they underwent. And they sat throughout the entire night, the darkness of exile, and they illuminated to the extent that their students confused the light that was revealing that it's morning time. They transformed the darkness into light. And that's why he says time to say the Shema of the morning. What's Shema? Shema is the oneness of Hashem. There's Shema in the nighttime, Shema in the morning, as we discussed the differences between the nighttime and the daytime. But now it says we've illuminated so much, it's time to reveal the oneness of Hashem. Hashem is ready to reveal himself. But nevertheless, the style of the Seder throughout the entire night is question and answer. And therefore the law is, someone who doesn't have a child, if it's only a couple who are sitting, at the Seder plate, at the Seder table, and you have a child, the wife asks the husband the questions. And someone who doesn't have a wife, then he asks to ask a question on his own. As we spoke about yesterday, the inner dimension of these questions is that we, the sons, the children of Hashem, are asking of Hashem, the Father. And therefore, we could explain the wise son's question that even if he's a chacham in the Torah, even if he's wise in the Torah, nevertheless he must ask, because that's the order of Pesach that you have to ask. And even though it's understood that the being that the Torah arranges the questions and the answers into 4 categories and connecting to 4 sons, the most pristine level of the most highest question is the one that the wise son asks. And in his question, he alludes to the deepest and the most loftiest level of wisdom. Especially as we mentioned yesterday, that according to the Arizal, the great Kabbalist, the Arizal of Rav Yitzchak Luria, and in his teachings, that the 4 sons corresponds to the 4 worlds, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, V'Asiyah. As we mentioned yesterday, the Chacham corresponds to Atzilut. The Rasha, the wicked one, corresponds to the lowest of the 4 worlds, Asiyah. The Tam, the simple son, it corresponds to the world of Bria, of creation. And the one who doesn't know how to ask corresponds to the world of Yetzirah, of the world of formation. But nevertheless, the wise son corresponds to the highest of the 4 worlds, the world which is called Atzilut. And the word Atzilut comes from Etzels because it's in proximity to open godliness, infinity. It's the first of the 4 worlds, and therefore the infinite light still shines and radiates very openly in Atzilut, to the extent that our sages explain that in Atzilut, the world of Atzilut is all light and no darkness. The light and the vessel are one and the same over there. There's no distinction. And so the Chacham, the wise son, corresponds to that world. And his question is a question that reveals the psychology of the attribute of wisdom of the world of Atzilut. So surely in his question, his loftiest question, and the answer that we must provide for him has to be the loftiest answer as well. And therefore, we have to understand, number one, what exactly is the unique wisdom and the depth of the Chacham's, the wise son's question? What are these testimonial, etc., that our God commanded you? Because seemingly this could be also asked by somebody who didn't learn at all. Doesn't seem a uniquely wise question. Anybody could ask this. What are we doing here? Could you explain this? Could you explain this? Why is this considered to be the apex of questions? Second question. What is the depth of the answer that we instructed to provide to him? That after the afikoman, we can't eat anything else. In other words, we are providing an answer to satisfy a question that comes from Chochmah Vatzilut. We know in Chassidus it explains that when something is falling, to catch it has to be stronger than the force that is of the fall in itself. In order to answer a question, the question must come from a much higher source than the answer. The answer itself must come from a much higher source than the question. And so, what's so deep about this answer that after the afikoman we don't need any other food? That's so deep. That's the answer. That satisfies chokhmah v'tzilut. And finally, the last question. The Mishnah in itself. There's an explicit Mishnah in Tractate Pesachim, which talks about the legal and the homiletic aspect of Pesach. And even a 10-year-old, as a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot tells us, from 10-year-old, you're supposed to learn Mishnah. So technically, even a 10-year-old who learned this already understands that it is a law of the Mishnah that after Afikoman we're not allowed to eat anything. So even a 10-year-old understands this. How does this satisfy and such a deep question, and we don't even understand the depth of it, but what's so deep about the answer? And Be'ezrat Hashem will continue this tomorrow.